Well, we're finally at the beach, which is primarily a story about Zuko and Azula's angels being sent off to Ember Island for a forced vacation. We'll learn a little bit about each of them, and that Azula is definitely crazy. Everything involving her eventually descends to domination, whether it's beach volleyball or whatever it is that they're playing, or trying to get a boy to like her. They break down their problems as basically, Ty Lee was one of 7 sisters who looked identical, so she seeks attention now to try to make up for it. May was an only child, but had to deal with an overbearing mother who made demands of her that sapped her of most of her ability to give a crap. And Zuko's mad at himself because he doesn't know what's going on. He's got what he wanted, but he still isn't happy. Azula is dismissive of all of this because she believes she's perfect.
I could sit here and complain how our mom liked Zuko more than me, but I don't really care. My own mother thought I was a monster. She was right, of course, but it still hurt.
It's been suggested that Azula is a victim in all this, and arguments have been made to explain that. As with other cases, her actions are the result of other people during her upbringing. Well, that's certainly an argument that could be made, although obviously a mother who is still encouraging her son to bond with his sister, despite voicing concerns about her, isn't exactly in the same league as a guy who burns his son's face and exiles him. Well, that's not even the same sport. But even if you believe that this is such a cruelty that it explains her behavior, it's important to stop short of taking that into the area of blame. The chicken and the egg thing is especially important. Iroh's comment that she's crazy and needs to go down is not a sign that he had a lifelong rejection of her, as has been suggested, but that her behavior has been out of control for her whole life. I also believe a distinction needs to be made between identifying causes and making excuses. Sokka's sexism came from the attitude of his tribe. That explains why he thinks that way on occasion. It's a cause. But that's not an excuse. It doesn't make his sexism any less wrong. Likewise, however much you want to wallpaper over Azula's manipulative and sadistic behavior, in the end, these were horrible things that stayed with her until she grew up into a horrible adult. Unlike other characters, Azula doesn't evolve beyond her flaws. She embraces them. Now, you may find it tragic, but being a tragic character doesn't make one less of a villain. In many villains, tragedy is part of their backstory, and frankly, Azula's are mostly inferred by fans with a heavy dose of spin. While we always encourage thinking and re-examining things here at the Opinionated Guides, ultimately, there is no reason that the straightforward explanation the show provides isn't the truth, that her gifts made her arrogant to the point of being a monster. Personal reinterpretations are certainly fine. It's just important to remember that there aren't really any flaws in the idea that what you see is the be-all, end-all of Azula. So, to prove how not totally crazy she is, Azula suggests ending their vacation by going back to the party they left and trashing the place for no reason. Meanwhile, in the brief but action-packed B-story of the title character, the bounty hunter catches up with Aang, and we discover that he has a unique form of firebending. He can use a tattoo of a third eye to project something that explodes, causing Sokka to eventually nickname him Combustion Man. They escape, but barely, leading us into The Avatar and the Fire Lord, a vision of the connection between Sozin and Roku. He tells Aang to meet him on his home island, where all will be revealed. Ooh! The upshot is that the two men were lifelong friends, but eventually Sozin thought that the Fire Nation was so prosperous and wonderful that it should share this with the rest of the world, even if they didn't realize it was for their own good. But as Roku was in charge of maintaining the balance as the Avatar, he refused to consider it. So when Sozin tried it anyway, Roku had to put a stop to it. That seemed to be the end of it until the day this island's volcano erupted. Sozin came to originally help Roku save the village, but when he realized that if Roku died there'd be no stopping his plans, he left him to die and be reborn as Aang. And that's why the air nomads were wiped out, so that the Avatar couldn't oppose him again. During all this, Zuko has been learning of this from Sozin's point of view by reading the hidden knowledge of secret stuff. But it doesn't have the answers he was looking for. So he goes to see Iroh, whose revelation explains the hint that was dropped by Zuko's vision of himself with Aang's tattoos.
You'll have more than one great-grandfather, Prince Zuko. Sozin was your father's grandfather. Your mother's grandfather was Avatar Roku.
And because of his unique heritage, he has the power to restore the balance as well and restore the Fire Nation to its true glory instead of this corruption. Incidentally, this is the first time all season that Iroh has actually spoken. He doesn't say much in Fire, but the producers insist that this was always the plan and has nothing to do with Greg Baldwin taking over the role of his voice, because he does do a fine job. In The Runaway, we open with Toph aghast at Katara's betrayal of her as she's dragged away by the Fire Nation, and cue 3 days earlier. They help Aang practice his combat, but soon wind up hitting each other, and soon...
Hungry for a mud pie?
Yeah, it's the mud wrestling. They're minors, so you're not allowed to enjoy this. Although with the number of shots of Toph's bare feet, I'm not sure if Quentin Tarantino wasn't involved in some way. They're just about out of money, but they find a guy scamming people with a shell game, and Toph uses her earthbending to win despite his cheating.
She used earthbending to win the game! Classic!
Ah, so she cheated.
What? Putting aside for the moment that you stole from an army of pirates and rationalized it away, didn't you just a little while ago lie to your friends, steal from others, destroy property on a massive scale, all while conning people into believing you were their beloved patron spirit? And you're going to act judgmental of Toph for outfoxing a rigged game? I'm really trying here. I'm already calling Azula Madam Crazy Pants. I really don't want to seem like I've got it out for the women in this series. But just meet me halfway, Katara, and try not to be so uptight.
Ah, I see. You're acting like this because of your parents.
Oh, for God's sakes. Now, Katara does have a point that these scams do put them at risk. I don't disagree. But Sokka had a point that Katara's actions jeopardized the entire world as the Painted Lady. It potentially could have kept them from reaching the rendezvous on which the entire world would turn and risk the army discovering Aang. Perhaps if Toph had have some kind of alter ego out of the Painted Lady, Katara could maybe rein it in.
It's a wanted poster of you, the Runaway. Is that what you're called now? Are you proud of this?
And perhaps we could find a perfectly spherical chicken of uniform density while we're at it. But of course the show does recognize this disparity, and Katara does get called out on her need to be the mom of the group. And that can be a good thing, of course. She was the one whose leadership in the desert kept them alive. But her feud with Toph has allowed her darker side to come out, even rummaging through Toph's stuff. But on overhearing their thoughts about her, the bad and the good, Katara decides to pull the ultimate scam with Toph, turning Toph in for the reward, and then letting her metal bending get her to freedom. But it turns out this whole thing was a trap by Combustion Man. He has the two girls locked in a wooden cage and waits for Aang to rescue them. But Katara uses her sweat to bend their way out. Also, during the escape, Toph hits Combustion Man in his third eye with a pebble, and that causes explosions to detonate around him and knock him all over the place. This might have been what happened to him so that he has a metal foot and hand. At some point, his power detonated close enough to seriously injure himself. Toph and Katara resolve their differences, so we have time to get to the Puppet Master. They wind up outside a town where people have been disappearing, and Toph is convinced that she hears people under the mountain. But a nice old lady lets them stay at her inn. But her comments seem odd and out of place.
Sokka? Sokka, what are you doing? You can't just snoop around someone's house.
You were snooping around Toph's stuff 2 paragraphs ago! They discover 2 things: that the lady has a creepy large number of puppets around, and that she's from the Southern Water Tribe. She's also a waterbender, the last from their tribe. The firebenders were kidnapping waterbenders and locking them away, but she managed to escape and wants to teach the Southern technique to Katara to carry on their traditions, which actually makes her happy enough to stop bossing everyone around for 5 minutes. But the lessons start to get creepy, like when she sucks the water out of a bunch of flowers and leaves them dead. Even I think that's a bit much, and this is from a guy who was mocking the swamp episode. But if you really want to exceed the recommended daily allowance of creepiness, that comes with the full moon, when they discover all the people locked up in the mountain, and by the old lady. In that prison, her mind became twisted, and she invented the, I'm sorry to keep using this word, but there is no other more fitting, creepiest form of bending yet.
Blood bending.
Ugh. Naturally, Katara wants nothing to do with such an icky, there's a new word, icky technique, but the old lady fights her. The struggle has a possible subtext to it that we're going to get back to later, but for right now, this is an intense fight until the only way to save Aang and Sokka is for Katara to bloodbend her. This continues to establish the grayness of this world, that even in the Southern Water Tribe evil can arise, but it also shows how the corruption of the Fire Lord is contagious. He's going to have to be stopped, so they prepare for the invasion in Nightmares and Daydreams, where we learn that despite Sokka's belly aching, they're actually 4 days early, which means 4 days of Aang getting all worked up over it, with nightmares and hallucinations from lack of sleep, but in the end getting encouragement enough to believe that he can do it, and go to sleep. It's a fun and silly thread, in contrast to Zuko's indulging in life as a prince, until after a war meeting where he was at his father's right hand, he realized he's just not being himself. This leads us into the invasion, the two-parter Day of Black Sun. With the loss of the entire Earth Kingdom army, they're going to have to put together whatever they have. There's the Swampies plus Buddha Bubba, the Boulder and the Hippo, Haru and his father, those are the guys from the prison rig with the coal, and the Mechanist from the Northern Air Temple responsible for a lot of the steampunk tech that we see. And he even made Aang a new glider. And the invasion really does live up to the build-up it's been getting all season, with tanks and submarines and all kinds of bending. And while all that's great, it's also a chance for Sokka to show off his stuff. He's been their plan guy, and when his father's injured, he steps up and takes charge, rallying their forces and leading them towards seemingly inevitable victory. Aang has also changed dramatically from last time. He shaves off his hair and puts on his monk garb again, and he's not going to fail like he had in Ba Sing Se. Aang is determined that this time he's going to strike so hard the Fire Lord won't even know what happened. And he won't, because he's not there. The palace has been abandoned. So, no Fire Lord. Remember that the Earth King was nice enough to share the plan with Azula? But Sokka thinks that he wouldn't go far. He likely has a hidden bunker nearby in case he needs to take charge. But could they find it in time? It's a conundrum. Katara points out if they knew to evacuate the palace, then this could all be a trap. But their father says that everyone here is committed to winning this no matter what the sacrifice, and they will keep fighting if they think there's hope that it can end now. So Aang decides they'll keep fighting and try to find the Fire Lord before the eclipse. They manage to get to his secret bunker, only to find that he's not in that either. He's in a super secret double dog hideout, while Azula is here to deal with whoever might come. Not alone, of course. She has no bending during the eclipse, but the eclipse won't affect the Dai Li agents that she brought back from Ba Sing Se, who engaged them just to buy time until the eclipse ends. But Sokka sees through this and tells them to just ignore her and look for the Fire Lord.
It's a trap. Don't say I didn't warn you.
Ignore!
So, Sokka's your name, right? My favorite prisoner used to mention you all the time. She was convinced you were going to come rescue her. Of course, you never came, and she gave up on you.
Yes, yes, tell me all about how misunderstood Princess is. During all this, Zuko has been preparing for the battle, but surprisingly, his confrontation is not with Aang, but the Fire Lord. He's discovered that what he was chasing all this time isn't what he really wanted, and he's going to oppose him from now on. There's just one thing that can stop him from leaving right this second, and that's the stunning revelation! Remember when the old Fire Lord was going to tell Ozai to kill Zuko? Well, his mother hatched a plan that would instead kill the Fire Lord and put Ozai on the throne. And what's telling is that he and Azula are both pulling the same plan. Talk the other person into inaction until they run out of time. But Zuko outmaneuvers his father by using Iroh's lightning redirecting lesson to turn it back on him and escape. Although Azula escapes Team Avatar as well.
The eclipse is over, but I can face the Fire Lord anyway.
No, I don't think that's a good idea.
But I'm ready. I came here with a job to do, and everyone's counting on me.
Aang doesn't want this to turn into another Ba Sing Se, but Toph and Sokka convince him that without surprise to gain an advantage, the best move right now is to withdraw, to, again as he had told the people of Amashu himself, live to fight another day. So he reluctantly agrees. But when the Fire Nation counterattacks with adaptations of the Mechanist's own war balloons, they know it's over. The Fire Nation starts bombing their subs and boats despite the Swampies and, oh, Buddha Bubba. Hey, time is an illusion. Couldn't you have maybe told us that this was all a trap, huh? Well, with them cut off, there's no option but for the adults to surrender and everyone else to escape on Appa.